So today marks the 6th day of our 7-day Ango Sesshin. We're almost there, but our spirit must stay strong until the end. It's been really incredible experience practicing with everybody this week. It's been such a great time for us to deepen our practice, and I've been so inspired by everybody's determination and commitment to practice. I've had some good moments and some not so good moments. But even though the not so good moments can be rough patches to work through, there's always a lesson in there somewhere. Sometimes the greatest lessons for me are when I find myself in a rut or a cycle of thoughts. I've learned to just come back to the breath, check my posture, my mudra, my lower back for slumping, whether things are going good or going rough. You always come back to the breath. The good times are impermanent. The bad times are impermanent. They will come and they will go, such is life. Just like the 11-headed Kannon statue behind me. She wears a crown of many faces, sadness, despair, joy, and on top, calmness, serenity. She wears these as a crown, these emotions, knowing that they're all a part of life and that each is impermanent. As I was preparing for today's talk, I was reflecting back on the past 2 years and up to this point to where we are today. In late 2020 or early 21, I'm having a tough time pinning the exact time down. It all has been one long day. It seems like, but I was asked to give a student talk, and I had asked if I could push the date out until the following year. I was in a weird headspace at the time, as probably most people were in the world. The pandemic was still going strong. I was troubled by everything that came with it. The loss of life, businesses shutting down, unemployment, the lack of essential grocery items, difficulty in getting them. And on top of that, I was worried about what was going on with our nation's leadership. It was all very frustrating and confusing. Our country was at such a divide and still seems to be. It started to take an effect on me in a very negative way. I wasn't very optimistic. It's very doom and gloom. I got very caught up in it. You couldn't get away from it, really, unless you just shut everything off, which is eventually what I had to do. Disconnect a lot of social media, turn the news off, and just sit and read. Go for walks, go for hikes, whatever we were allowed to do at the time. Needless to say, I didn't think that I had any business giving a student talk anytime in the near future. I wasn't in the right headspace, and I didn't think that I had anything worth saying or that people would even want to hear on their Saturday morning, looking for some Dharma relief and some sangha support. I didn't think that was going to come for me at that time. Then in February of 21, I received an email asking if I would be willing to fulfill the role of Shuso for summer's practice period. I mentioned that in my opening talk that I was with my son at the park getting ready to play basketball when I opened the email. He knew when I was reading it that something was up, either the color loss from my face or the look of how am I going to make this happen. And he asked, is everything okay? I responded, yes, so everything is okay. I just received a very important email that I'll tell you about at a later time. I knew I would need the support of many people in order to make this happen for a month. Support from my wife, my son, his mother, and work. A lot of people depend on me every day, and the thought of not being there for them for 30 days concerned me. I've been reminded of what is written on the Han of most Zen temples, something along the lines of, great is the matter of birth and death. Life slips quickly by. Time waits for no one. Wake up, wake up. Don't waste a moment. Or as Roshi interprets it, don't goof off. Getting the invitation alone created a shift in my whole life. Luckily, I was able to gain the support from everybody that I needed to be up here for this month. I then knew that if I was going to be a Shuso, I had to get my act together. This included my presence with our online Zoom practice. How am I responding to situations? Am I helping them or am I making them worse? I had to pay close attention to my physical and mental health, my studies. I took inventory of everything and got to work. I wasn't going to let my fears and anxiety take this opportunity away. I had a lot of anxiety about what this would entail. What started as one talk almost a year and a half ago has evolved to 7 in less than 3 weeks. I can't say that it's getting any easier getting up here and speaking. But what I can tell you is that I feel like I'm growing each time. I've always been concerned with whether my talk would be good enough or long enough, or would others criticize my understanding? Judging myself constantly, worrying about others judging me. I'm still working through this, practicing with it. Letting go of the idea of good and bad, and just doing my best with what I have. I am not a Dogen scholar. Oftentimes, I can't even tell you what I just read after reading a chapter in a book. My life experiences and my everyday life is what I'm practicing with. That's all I can do. It does me no good to compare myself because we're all different. I can only present who I am and what I'm working with. I had dokusans with Roshi and Nyose once a month, 5 months leading up to this, trying to learn about what exactly it is that I would be asked to do, trying to prepare the best I could. Most of the time, the answer was just do your best. Probably the best advice I could have gotten. Because the truth is, you cannot prepare. You do not know what you're going to face. The first thing and the most important thing is to show up. Driving up the mountain on my first day here, I could feel my chest tightening with anxiety. A month of the unknown ahead. Would it be a complete disaster? Will they regret asking me to do this? All the worst case scenarios that your mind throws at you at the wrong moments. The first thing I learned to do was to listen and pay attention to what is going on here at Zen Center. Every day there is so much that goes on behind the scenes to keep it up and running. I have a greater appreciation for the entire Kwong family, the residents, the staff, and everyone involved here in the day-to-day operations and what they do to keep this place up and running. Second thing I learned is that this is not about me. I needed to figure out what I'm good at and offer the help wherever I can. This is a position of service, not authority. It's not about telling people what to do. It's about asking what you can do to help and adding value where you can. Setting an example, helping people, helping each other, to me, is what this practice boils down to. I feel that I've learned so much over the past 3 weeks, and I have felt a definite shift in my practice. A shift that takes the my out of it and turns it just into practice. Practice for all sentient beings. Could not have been done without the support of everybody here. Thank you, Roshi, for giving me the push in the right direction and for having confidence in me to fulfill this role. I came across this poem in a book titled Zen Seeds by Shindo Aoyama. The life of a female Soto priest. The poem is by Mitsuo Aida, and it's titled The Gift of a Smiling Face. With just your being there, the atmosphere somehow brightens. With just your being there, everyone feels at ease. I yearn to be just like you. With just your being there, the atmosphere somehow brightens. With just your being there, everyone feels at ease. I yearn to be just like you. The theme I chose for practice period was something that inspired Dogen to write the Mountains and Waters Sutra. Sudong Po, a Sung poet, was awakened by the sounds of the stream in Lushan one night after having heard his Zen teacher, Chang Sung, expound the discourse of insentient beings on the Dharma. He immediately composed the following poem. The sounds of the valley streams are his long, broad tongue. The sights of the mountains are his pure body. 84,000 verses are heard throughout the night. How can I relate to others what they say? I came across this poem while studying the Mountains and Waters, specifically Shohaku Okumura's Practitioner's Guide, which I would highly recommend if this sutra speaks to you. I was originally going to use Mountains and Waters as the theme for Ango, but was really drawn to the poem that helped inspire Dogen to write it. I've always been intrigued by the Mountains and Waters Sutra. The title itself drew me in because of my love for the outdoors, specifically mountains. I have a deep connection with them, and I have since a young age. A few that come to mind are skiing in New England at Loon Mountain with my family, something we still enjoy in Tahoe each year. Camping in the White Mountains as a teenager with friends, getting into things that we shouldn't have. And since this is being recorded, that's all I'm going to say about that. My son was born in the town of Mount Shasta, where his grandfather lives. That town is a very powerful feeling when you were there. It's such a beautiful place. I had the opportunity to stay at Shasta Abbey Zen Center for a couple of nights when I was there in 2007. When we have free time, we love to spend it backpacking in all the beautiful terrain throughout Northern California. Trinity Alps, Kings Canyon, the Sierra, Big Sur, Sequoia National Park, Desolation Wilderness. There's something very empowering about being deep in the backcountry with everything you need to survive on your back, filtering water from fresh streams and sleeping under the stars. Something about the feeling of being on a mountain and enjoying the views of the ranges to remind you of how small we are and how small our problems are, as big as they seem times in this universe. The feeling and the connection to the earth is all very humbling. And of course, Sonoma Mountain, here at this beautiful space that Roshi has provided us for so many years to practice at. The book Dharma Bums by Jack Kerouac had a big impact on me in my 20s. In it, Kerouac learns about Zen from poet and friend Gary Snyder, who also taught him how to climb his first mountain at Matterhorn Peak. This book was also an inspiration for me when I first started practicing. I've read it many times and still continue to read it every year or so. One of my favorite quotes from it is, "Now the mountains were getting that pink tinge. I mean, the rocks. They were just solid rock covered with the atoms of dust accumulated there since beginningless time. In fact, I was afraid of those jagged monstrosities all over and around our heads. They're so silent," I said. "Yeah, man, to me, a mountain is a Buddha. Think of the patience, hundreds, thousands of years just sitting there, being perfectly silent, and like praying for all of us living creatures, in that silence, and just waiting for us to stop all our fretting and fooling." I was exposed to Snyder's epic poem, Mountains and Rivers Without End, before Dogen. One of my favorite quotes from that: "A kind of ice age spreading, filling valleys, shaving soils, paving fields. You can walk in it, live in it, drive through it. Then it melts away. For whatever sprouts after the age of frozen hearts, flesh-carved rock, and gusts on the summit. Smoke from forest fires is white. The haze above the distant valley like a dusk. It's just one world, this spine of rock and streams, and snow, and the wash of gravels, silts, sands, bunch grasses, saltbrush, bee fields. 20 million human people downstream here below." Both of these writers helped shape my life as a young adult, and I continue to learn from them today. Being on and near mountains have played an important role in my growth as a person, and still continues to. That is what drew me to the Mountains and Waters Sutra. Each time I read it, something new pops out at me that I hadn't read before or understood. I've only started to scratch the surface with this 29th book of Shobogenzo. In my opinion, it's one of the most beautiful pieces of work. Over the past 6 months, I've been listening to lectures and reading books by Roshi, Norman Fisher, Michael Stone, Shohaku Okamura. I'm going to share some passages from the text, because the entire text is too long to get into in one talk, with some commentary provided by the notes that I took throughout this process that I thought would be helpful. These perspectives are a collection of what I learned from these teachers, not my own conclusions. What I'm sharing is what I learned. It's also important to know that these teachers stated that their interpretation is simply just their interpretation, not necessarily right or wrong. It was their understanding at the time of the writing when they were working on it. They could have a completely different understanding at a later time. This fascicle is broken out into 5 parts by Shohaku Okamura. First would be the mountains and waters are the expression of old Buddhas. 2 mountains, 3 waters, 4 mountains and waters are dwelling places for sages. In the conclusion, mountains are mountains and waters are waters. Today, I'm just going to discuss the first 2. Mountains and waters are the expression of old Buddhas and mountains. So a little bit about the Mountains and Waters Sutra. It's a book from Dogen's masterpiece, the Shobogenzo. It's widely considered to be one of the most beautiful of the 95 books of the Shobogenzo, according to Carl Bielefeld. The text was written in 1240 at Dogen's monastery in Kyoto, and the manuscript from that time in Dogen's own hand still survives. This year saw a marked increase in the output of his essays for Shobogenzo, including the closely related work Keisei Sanshoku, written a few months before, essentially covering the same theme, which is something that I worked in one of the talks a couple weeks ago, namely the mountains and rivers as equivalent to the body and speech of Buddha. Gudo Nishijima, a modern Zen priest, sums up the essay as follows. Buddhism is basically a religion of belief in the universe. And nature is the universe showing its real form. So to look at nature is to look at the Buddha truth itself. For this reason, Master Dogen believed that nature is just Buddhist sutras. So I'm now going to read the first two sections of Mountains and Waters, with some commentary in between and at the end. Mountains and waters right now are the actualization of the ancient Buddha way. Each abiding in its phenomenal expression realizes completeness. Because mountains and waters have been active since before the empty eon, they are alive at this moment. Because they have been the self since before form arose, they are emancipation, realization. So in this very first section, mountains and waters are viewed as the sutra, or the actual expression of Buddha's enlightenment. We learn it's not a sutra about mountains and waters. They are the sutra. I believe our friend Genzen used this, or a part of this, as his Ango theme in February 2019. Because mountains are high and broad, the way of riding the clouds is always reached in the mountains. The inconceivable power of soaring in the wind comes freely from the mountains. Riding the clouds and following the wind represent the state of freedom in meditation, zazen. Priest Daiokai of Mount Furong said to the assembly, "The green mountains are always walking. A stone woman gives birth to a child at night. Mountains do not lack the qualities of mountains. Therefore, they always abide in ease and always walk. You should examine in detail this quality according to the mountains walking." Mountains walking is just like humans walking. Accordingly, do not doubt mountains walking, even though it does not look the same as human walking. The Buddha ancestors' words point to walking. This is fundamental understanding. You should penetrate these words. So in the realm of non-duality, mountains and human beings are not separate. Because green mountains walk, they are permanent. Although they walk more swiftly than the wind, someone in the mountains does not realize or understand it. In the mountains means the blossoming of the entire world. People outside the mountains do not realize or understand the mountains walking. Those without eyes to see mountains cannot realize, understand, see, or hear this as it is. If you doubt mountains walking, you do not know your own walking. It is not that you do not walk, but that you do not understand or know your own walking. Since you do not know your own walking, you should fully know the green mountains walking. Green mountains are neither sentient nor insentient. You are neither sentient nor insentient. At this moment, you cannot doubt green mountains walking. Here again, the experience and meditation of the wholeness of mountains and human beings is indicated. You should study the green mountains using numerous worlds as your standard. You should clearly examine the green mountains walking in your own walking. You should also examine walking backward and backward walking and investigate the fact that walking forward and backward has never stopped since this very moment before form arose, since the time of the king of the empty eon. Green mountains master walking, and eastern mountains master traveling on water. Accordingly, these activities are a mountain's practice. Keep its own form without changing body and mind. A mountain always practices in every place. Don't slander by saying that a green mountain cannot walk and an eastern mountain cannot travel on water. When your understanding is shallow, you doubt the phrase, green mountains are walking. When your learning is immature, you are shocked by the words flowing mountains. Without full understanding, even the words flowing water, you drown in small views and narrow understanding. Yet the characteristics of mountains manifest their form and life force. There is walking, there is flowing, and there is a moment when a mountain gives birth to a mountain's child, because mountains are Buddha ancestors. Buddha ancestors appear in this way. Even if you see mountains as grass, trees, earth, rocks, or walls, do not take this seriously or worry about it. It is not complete realization. Even if there is a moment when you view the mountains as the seven treasures shining, this is not the true source. Even if you understand mountains as the realm where all Buddhas practice, this understanding is not something to be attached to. Even if you have the highest understanding of mountains as all Buddhas' inconceivable qualities, the truth is not only this. These are conditioned views. This is not the understanding of Buddha ancestors, but just looking through a bamboo tube at the corner of the sky. Turning an object and turning the mind is rejected by the great sage. Explaining the mind and explaining true nature is not agreeable to Buddha. Seeing into mind and seeing into true nature is the activity of people outside the way. Set words and phrases are not the words of liberation. There is something free from all these understandings. Green mountains are always walking, and eastern mountains travel on water. You should study this in detail. A stone woman gives birth to a child at night means that the moment when a barren woman gives birth to a child is called night. There are male stones, female stones, and non-male and non-female stones. They are placed in the sky and in the earth and are called heavenly stones and earthly stones. These are explained in the ordinary world, but not many people actually know about it. You should understand the meaning of giving birth to a child. At the moment of giving birth to a child, is the mother separate from the child? You should study not only that you become a mother when your child is born, but that you also become a child. This is the actualization of given birth and practice realization. You should study and investigate this thoroughly. Great Master Kwong-zen of Yunmen said, "Eastern mountains travel on water." The reason these words were brought forth is that all mountains are Eastern mountains, and all Eastern mountains travel on water. Because of this, 9 mountains, Mount Sumeru and other mountains, appear and have practice realization. These are called Eastern mountains. But could Yunmen penetrate the skin, flesh, bones, and marrow of the Eastern mountains and their vital practice realization? Now, in Great Song China, there are careless fellows who form groups. They cannot be set straight by the few true masters. They say that the statement, Eastern mountains travel on water, or Nangquan's story of a sickle, is illogical. But what they mean is that any words having to do with logical thought are not Buddha ancestors' Zen stories, and that only illogical stories are Buddha ancestors' expressions. In this way, they consider Huangbo's staff and Linji's shout as being beyond logic and unconcerned with thought. They regard these as the great enlightenments that precede the arising of form. Ancient masters used expedient phrases which are beyond understanding to slash entangled vines. People who say this have never seen a true master, and they have no eye of understanding. They are immature, foolish fellows, not even worth discussing. In China, these last 200 or 300 years, there have been many groups of bald-headed rascals. What a pity. The great road of Buddha ancestors is crumbling. People who hold this view are not even as good as listeners of the small vehicles and are more foolish than those outside the way. They are neither lay people nor monks, neither human nor heavenly. They are more stupid than animals who learn the Buddha way. The illogical stories mentioned by you bald-headed fellows are only illogical for you, not for Buddha ancestors. Even though you do not understand, you should not neglect studying the Buddha ancestors' path of understanding, even if it is beyond understanding in the end. Your present understanding is off the mark. I've personally seen and heard many people like this in Song China. How sad that they do not know about the phrases of logical thought or penetrating logical thought into phrases and stories. When I laughed at them in China, they had no response and remained silent. Their idea about illogical words is only distorted view. Even if there is no teacher to show you the original truth, your belief in spontaneous enlightenment is heretical. You should know that Eastern mountains traveling on water is the bones and marrow of the Buddha ancestors. All waters appear at the foot of the Eastern mountains. Accordingly, all mountains ride on the clouds and walk in the sky. Above all waters are all mountains. Walking beyond and walking within are both done on water. All mountains walk with their toes on all waters and splash there. Thus, in walking, there are 7 paths vertical and 8 paths horizontal. This is practice realization. So that's just the first 2. It's a pretty, it goes on probably quite a bit longer. So I'm going to stop there for the section and just provide a little bit more commentary. So mountains really express stillness. Sonoma Mountain right now is actualizing the Buddha's teaching. Not 1,000 years ago, right now. Mountains and waters don't end. They are from beginningless time. In the same way, our life is like this. Our life doesn't really have a beginning. When we experience ourselves, we do it in the same way that a mountain experiences itself, beginningless. Everything that appears in this world is an expression of the most profound Buddhist teachings. Everything expresses the fundamental truth of existing. The truest teaching that the Buddha ever used is mountains and waters and everything that appears in this world. That's the foundation of this text. We would like to think that this is true, but ultimately we do not always think it's true. We get so caught up in our everyday lives, we don't see the world in this way. When we are driving, working, eating, parenting, we're not always aware that these activities are the Buddha's truth. Profound reality manifesting just like this right now. Right now it appears as the sounds of the birds outside, of the floor creaking, or woodpeckers. Realizing completely, feeling fully satisfied, exactly complete here and now. Each thing as it appears is complete. Not in tomorrow's Zazen, not in tonight's Zazen, not in the next book you read. Right now is actually how it is. We're living it. We don't realize it, and it makes us unhappy. We make other people unhappy. We get destructive. Every time we sit Zazen, we're coming closer and closer every time. It's harder to be doing destructive things while you're sitting Zazen than it is the rest of the time. To come back to Zazen is our possibility. After a while, it just becomes mountains are mountains. Mountains and rivers go back millions of years. When we are with mountains and waters, we are relating to something ancient. There's no start. There is no beginning and no end. Impermanence is the only thing that is not impermanent. It goes on and on. What we are, we have always been and always will be. Mountains and waters have always existed. They transcend time. That's why when they appear in time, they're all inclusive. And that's true for us as well. The self that we think we are existed before any entity ever existed. Because of that, the beingness, the entityness is its own emancipation, its own opening up. The limitation is our own opening up. Very similar to the Heart Sutra, boundlessness. Everything is complete in this moment. The entire universe and all of space and time is in this moment. When we go into the mountains, we feel it. We love to go to the mountains, camping, backpacking. We feel it. Spend 2 to 3 days there, and you will know what I mean. By a river or by water, you will feel it. Norman Fisher states in a series of lectures that sums it up really nice that I'd like to share. Dogen is trying to speak from the tongue of rivers and the body of mountains. The more you look at the physical world, the more it's not there. The more you see space, look closer and closer and closer at mountains. Like our breath in Zazen, go deeper into what we think brings us joy, and we will see that it's nothing actually. It's no thing. Observer and the observed meet. The mountains are beyond all ways that you can understand the mountains. Turning the mind backwards Don't always look at the mind as seeking an object. Be able to turn the mind around, which is walking backwards. The mind is able to see the mind when you experience craving instead of focusing on the object of craving. Release the object and turn the mind back on the craving itself and focus on the craving. When you really understand the craving, that is walking backwards. And when you turn around again, you don't see the object in relation to the craving. You see it as having a background, which is just the whole net. You can't see the net if you only see the object with the craving. Let go of the craving. If there is craving, the reason why it's bad for you is because you cannot see the path. The path is action. When you look at a river, trace the river back to its source. Backward walking. Tracing backwards. Follow the water from the faucet back to the wells and pipelines, to the clouds. And where did that water begin? Look closer at your life. Look closer at death. Sudong Po, a Sung poet, was awakened by the sounds of the stream in Lushan one night after having heard his Zen teacher, Chang Sung, expound the discourse of insentient beings on the Dharma. He immediately composed the following poem. The sounds of the valley streams are his long, broad tongue. The sights of the mountains are his pure body. 84,000 verses are heard throughout the night. How can I relate to others what they say? Thank you.